Hey everyone. So today's topic that I chose is around integration solution design best practices. And followed by that, in our next one, we're going to talk specifically about how you can start designing a B2B integration platform, right? So this couple of videos that I'm going to share with all of you is more focused towards uh, people okay who have an interest to move to integration solution or like becoming an integration architect, right? So as I mentioned, this is all about design, but it is quite high level, and but it's a hard to discuss at a detailed level without compromising customer privacy, right? But that's just so I'm going to just focus today on the best practices, right? Now moving on, today's objective is about how we can analyze the commonly seen customer requirements in any MFT or EDI project. And then the major section would be around solution design deliverables, right? So that I'm going to cover in the next one. I want to keep it short, right? Every video. And so now, talking about some of the commonly seen customer requirements in this integration space, typically, like the first one that I'm going to focus today is around functional requirements, right? Now, as a solution designer or as a solution architect or as an integration architect, you should be able to like once you receive the requirements, right, you should be able to distinguish between what are the core requirements, right, and what are the non-core requirements for a managed file transfer project. Typically when I mention the core requirements are which, okay, without that the project cannot go live, right? Those are meant to be core requirements. Non-core requirements are requirements which are nice to have, or maybe something that we can consider, okay, after the project goes live in phased manner, right? Those are not critical, or doesn't come in the path of your go live, right? Now, talking about core requirements, I've highlighted few of them. The first one is around trading partner file transfer profile setup, right, which includes their communication touch points, right? The second one is the trading partner roles, like whether it's a producer and or a consumer, right? Like, and their connection mostly whether there's listening or initiating. So think about like a Sterling file gateway, right? You have these producers and consumers, who is sending files, who is consuming the files and all that, right? The third one is around file transfer and routing among different trading partners, including one-to-one or one-to-many routing patterns, right? That is one of the functional requirement. The fourth requirement is around the logic to determine the consumer of the file based on like any predefined or like either predefined or maybe determined at runtime based on either the file name or maybe the mailbox, right? Something like that. Number five is around the file content processing logic, if required, right, for transforming the file contents on specific routes before they reach their final consumers. The sixth one is around file name processing logic to handle different operating system constraints and partner preferences, right? Some partner have their specific requirements and all that. The seventh one is around any kind of special processing requirements of trading partners, such as let's say feeding or collecting, timing or schedules, right? Volume, throttling. Maybe they just want to consume like 500 files in an hour, right? Something like that. Or and flow control, right? So these core requirements are essential for the basic functionality of a typical MFT or managed file transfer system, and customers typically cannot operate without them, right? That's why we say them as core requirements. Now, moving towards the non-core requirements, I have highlighted a few of them. The number one is around integration with specific backend systems treated as internal trading partners, right? Like depending on the customer's environment. Let's say you receive some files, and then how do you then post process? Like what are the downstream applications that are going to consume the data, right? It's more of the internal integrations and not the external trading partners. The second one is around advanced routing patterns beyond one to one and one to many if required by the customer, right? The third one is around any specific file transformation rules or protocols, unless mandated by the trading partners. The fourth one is around any specific file naming conventions or rules. And then the fifth one is any additional features that they're looking for, like, for example, the customer may have like requirement around auditing or maybe monitoring, reporting of like how many file transfers, how many are successful, how many are failed, those kind of like data, right, on a daily or weekly or monthly basis. And or like the any user interface, right, depend those are kind of the non-core requirements. So now, as I mentioned, non-core requirements are additional features or customization that may enhance the system but are not crucial for its basic operation. These requirements are often specific to a customer environments or additional needs. So it's important to know that the classification of core and non-core may vary depending upon the domain the customer belongs to. Like the retail customer might have a different requirement versus a customer in the financial domain, right? So, and also like how their existing infrastructure is, right? That is one of the other parameter. And any specific project requirements might be there, right? So definitely, from an integration architecture point of view, close collaboration with the customer is essential at this phase when you're collecting this financial functional requirements to accurately identify, and then definitely once you've identified, prioritizing the core requirements for the project, right? That's critical. Now, these are some of the other functional requirements, let's say from a in EDI type project, right, where it's not only as is file transfer, but you have some kind of transformation, right? Like let's say you're transacting EDI files and you're doing conversion to maybe XML or JSON, those kind of things. So for EDI type project, okay, the core requirements are, the first one is what kind of EDI standards they're dealing with. Like there are various industry standard EDI formats, right? Like for example, ANSI X12, EDIFACT, ACH, and then what kind of versions are in them. There are multiple versions on each of them, right? So definitely understanding and handling those sort of like standard specific acknowledgements, right? Like X12997, or like the, if you're talking about AS2, then protocol, then it's like AS2 MDNs, setting up all that, right? So I'm just giving a very high level understanding. The second one is around trading partner EDI profiles, like how do you set up and manage those trading partner EDI profiles, including the envelopes, right, at different layers, like various layers, whether it's an interchange level or a group level or a transaction level, and then the different types, right? The third one is on data transformation. So transformation between industry EDI standards, and then you have like, let's say, some custom in-house backend systems that understand maybe specific formats like an Excel or a CSV or maybe a flat file, those kind of, right? So understanding those requirements. The fourth one is around data processing, like batching of small transactions into large files, or maybe splitting of large files into smaller manageable chunks, right? It can be either way, right? So understanding those requirements as well is critical. The fifth one is around the communication part of it, right? With trading partner, like what kind of communication protocols that you want to implement or they support, right? Like someone may be interested in AS2, someone may be interested in AS3. Like maybe there are partners who are looking for SFTP or FTPS, right? The quite a few protocols. So you need to understand those, right? So these are some of the core functional requirements from an EDI project perspective. Now, some of the non-core requirements, right, are something around, like first is the on the visibility side, right? Like uh, maybe the customer is looking for an online query capabilities for the customer management, the support personnel, right? Like you may have a production support team, right, that are looking for some kind of like dashboard where they can like view what which files at which status and all that. Like maybe there's some stakeholders need access to those visibility dashboards, right? Reporting functionalities, right? That's important for the stakeholders. The business need to know like how their system is behaving, right? Are there any kind of backlogs, right, and all that. Monitoring and tracking capabilities, those are also essential, like those are also non-core requirements. Like, and then the core requirements including, as I mentioned, the EDI standard support, trading partner profile management, and then the data transformation piece of it, the processing and the communication setup, right? So these are some of the critical things that you need to understand from a functional requirements for an EDI project, right? Now moving on, from a security standpoint, right, you need to understand two things. Like the first one is the access control. The second one is auditing part of it, right? Very critical, especially when you're dealing with in a particular domain which is highly regulated. Like they have a lot of compliance requirements. Let's say you're working for a healthcare project, they have HIPAA requirements, right? SOC 1, SOC 2, because they're dealing with PHI data, right? So very, very important, right? Now, from access control, I've highlighted like the first one is around, as mentioned, controlling the access, right? Regulating who can access what resources, right? Preventing unauthorized access. Those are important, right? Like the second one is around strong authentication, like how you can implement, or the requirements around implementing like robust authentication methods, like maybe having a multi-factor authentication, right? When some or when connecting to different systems, and maybe having a single sign on, like those kind of things. The third one is around centralized authentication, as I mentioned, right? The single sign on, like consolidating user authentication in a single system, or a few systems divided by like different communities that the user belongs to. The fourth one is auditing, right? Recording all user activities, especially those of the administrators, for auditing purposes, which are critical. Like I'm going to touch base on the auditing part of it, right? Like when it comes to auditing, right, it gives you the visibility in the different system activities. Like when a team is supporting any kind of external audits, right, they need to provide those proofs, right? Okay, how a user has been provisioned in the system, the how, what kind of access that the user is having, right? What kind of data that they're dealing with, those kind of. So definitely from an auditing perspective, like making sure that you restrict access to authorized individuals and entities, right? Utilizing strong authentication mechanisms. I mentioned about the centralizing of authentication, right, for better management and control. So these are very important. And it also, like auditing ensures like visibility and accountability, right? Who is responsible for what part of it, right? So that's critical. Now, continuing with the security requirements, this is very important. Like how, what's your plan, or what are the requirements around securing both the data in transit as well as at rest, right? When it comes to an integration project. So, and then the main points are like, so how like what kind of encryption standards that you want to use, right? Like supporting PKI or PKCS standards for public key cryptography, right? Like using digital certificates. So those are important. Ensuring like the end-to-end privacy is maintained, right? From one system to another system by avoiding clear text data transmission. That's why never use FTP, right? For any external or even like even internal communication also. Like FTP is completely like prohibited, or like definitely not recommended, right? We maintaining data integrity, right? Like no one is manipulating the data in transit, right? So definitely ensuring like by you need to have like proper mechanisms to detect unauthorized modifications during transit. Supporting protocols like the AS2 or SMIME or maybe PGP, right? PGP encrypted files for enforcing like data privacy and integrity. Also, from a public key cryptography, like exchanging public keys with your trading partners while keeping the private keys secure. That's important. That's one of the requirements, right, from a security standpoint. Definitely prefer like instead of self-signed, preferring CA signed public certificates from trading partners, right? Enforcing certificate revocation list or CRL checks, right? Disabling outdated or insecure security implementations like MD5 or SHA-1, right? And older versions of SSL TLS or OpenSSL, right? So the key focus here is on implementing a very robust encryption, digital signatures, and certificate-based authentication to ensure the confidentiality, integrity, and non-repudiation, right, of data exchange between trading partners. Those are kind of the key things from a security standpoint. From a performance and or capacity requirements, right? Like large customers have very stringent performance requirements, and they typically follow a very rigorous approach. They have like dedicated performance testing teams, also like with the right tools and expertise, right, to conduct any kind of thorough testing. Performance requirements stem from formal service level agreements or SLAs with clearly defined metrics and measurements. SLAs are contractually binding as well sometimes and committed to like business partners or government agencies, right? So if you miss any SLA targets, right, that can lead to financial penalties or maybe reputation damage and strained business relationships. So yeah, and then if there is no SLA existed, then performance becomes maybe calculated based on current product volume or and projected growth, like how many files you're transacting today versus like in a month, like is there any growth trajectory, like are you going to transact more files with the same trading partner, what's the that number, right? Performance testing is also very closely tied to capacity planning, right? Like whether your system is able to keep up with the number of files that it is processing every day, right? Or is there any kind of fine tuning that is needed based on like the additional volume or the organic growth that the system is seeing, right? So definitely capacity planning is needed to ensure that the solution can handle that additional or anticipated workloads. Customers typically require a minimum 5-year lifespan for B2B solutions, like factoring in that annual growth and allowing for spare capacity. So the key takeaways here is like uh, large customers definitely invest in dedicated performance testing capabilities. The SLAs also drive performance requirements and commitments. Penalties, you have to look out for those for any missed SLAs, right? That can be severe and definitely may impact the finances and the relationships. And performance testing aligns with capacity planning for long-term sustainability and growth, right? Um, Now, some of the architectural constraints from a B2BI or Sterling File Gateway standpoint, right? B2BI or Sterling File Gateway is a single layer, right, in a multi-stack system architecture. So the vertical stack includes applications like Sterling File Gateway or the MFT solution or EDI, B2BI engine, the JVM or Java Virtual Machine, the OS, the drivers, and the hardware, right? So it's not just the product itself, right? Application itself, and then the virtualization trend, like virtualization can add more layers to the operating system, like host and guest OS instances, and cloud computing has added more complexity on top of that, right? How you're hosting, like whether you're hosting the application within a Docker container versus a VM or versus a physical machine and all that, right? So and this trend is increasingly popular, right? So the commonly seen constraints over there, the number one is the software licenses, right? And the cost about it, right? The procurement cycle, all that. The number two is companies' IT policies and existing IT landscape. Like customers may have enterprise integration bus already in place, and B2BI is just replacing the original B2B gateway, right? Or maybe they have chosen non-IBM products for enterprise level security implementation, right? So these are some of the constraints that might hinder the overall integration project, right? The number three is around distributed deployment. Like they may want, like the customer may want to spread B2B cluster nodes across multiple data centers, right? That's kind of a constraint. Like you need to plan accordingly as an integration architect. Number four is around virtualization. The IT policies may include like switching from maybe dedicated Unix or Windows servers to virtualized servers or maybe containers, right, on shared chassis. So the key takeaway is B2B or Sterling File Gateway is one component in a multi-layered system architecture, and a virtualization adds complexity to the stack. So deployment and integration of B2BI must consider these different various constraints, including also like the software licenses, the existing IT landscape, the distributed deployment topology, and the virtualization policies, right? When you design that. Now, that's it for today's session, but I just wanted to give you a sneak peek of our next session. So I'm going to continue this conversation and take it to the solution designing and the deliverables part of it, where I'm going to talk about some of the best practices from a solution design. What are the documents, right, that you need to create? Then I'm going to talk about major sections of the B2B solution design document, what goes into those documents, right, that you get reviewed and approved before you even start the project. I'm going to talk about the business sample, business flow diagram, right, how you can visualize that. And then the next is like an integration context diagram, right, a simple Sterling file gateway project versus a complex MFT project. A sample component diagram. I'm going to touch base on that part of it. What are the main components? And then a lower level drill down of that architecture. And then a sample process view, like a simple process, a business process, or maybe a complex process with custom PGP encryption and all that, right? Those kind of things. And then a sample deployment view. I'm going to touch base on that part of it in our next session. So yeah, that's just a sneak peek of it. I hope this was all useful to you. Feel free to provide some feedback to me, but I'm definitely looking forward to talk to you next week.